Okay, so this last part of education talks about a lot of concepts that we have already come across elsewhere throughout the course, but it has its own block in the textbook called Relationships and Processes in Schools. The only difference here is that we come across a few new bits of research and just for AO2, and we just summarize the key bits that we've discussed in this area. So it's things like hidden curriculum, pupil-pupil interaction, pupil-teacher, subcultures, and identities. So we've discussed this, we've looked at the theories around the role of education. We've spoken about it when we've looked at class, gender, and ethnicity. Now it's kind of tying it all together in its own section and giving it a bit more emphasis, a bit more evaluation, and a few more bits of AO2 as well. So let's have a look. We're starting with the hidden curriculum. Now, as we know, with the hidden curriculum, essentially it's messages and ideas that the school kind of promote without really realizing or consciously doing this. So wearing uniform, being on time, adhering to hierarchy, these are all things that you will have to do when you leave school, otherwise you'll be in prison. So it's a way of unconsciously putting forward these ideas, these values and beliefs. Perspective, I'm hoping you're saying it already. It's in what perspective values the hidden curriculum. The functionalists value it. It's needed for healthy competition. It's a spirit of meritocracy, you working hard to achieve. The hidden curriculum, Marxists are critical of because it argues it keeps you in your false class consciousness. It teaches you that middle class is better than working class, they would argue. And feminists would say it's patriarchal as a concept. Keeps girls in their potentially submissive positions. So research we've discussed, I've given you a little clue there. That's Willis's LAD study. Because they were pretty much told this is all you're going to do, this is all you're going to achieve. Via that hidden curriculum, that's all they did go on to achieve. So kept them where they were. So we'll delve a little bit further then. An anti-racist. So if somebody is an anti-racist, they believe that racism is significant. It emphasizes the need to challenge this, which may be hidden and unintentional, such as institutional racism, which we might find in the police. And it plays a role in challenging ethnic inequality. So where I'm going with this is, in what ways are the hidden curriculum potentially racist? So we're talking about how ethnicity plays a role here. And if we talk about management, the hierarchy of management, it's mainly white British, generally male head teachers, lots of female teachers. We've got 22,400 head teachers in 2018. 2/3 of those were women. As of January 2020, 92.9% of head teachers were white British. Now, in an ever-changing society, in a multicultural society, is that reflective of the pupils that they are teaching? Not necessarily. So it's quite an interesting, and hidden curriculum is, well, what is that essentially showing? If we have a school that is predominantly Asian or Africa and Caribbean, and we have not saying it's wrong to have a white British head teacher, but are they necessarily going to understand the pupils that they have in front of them? Now, I always think about this with politicians, and some people say, well, no, They need to go to Eton and have the best education. But how many people in the country are privately educated? So are they reflective of their people? It's interesting. So we talk about hidden curriculum, being on time, like I said, wearing a uniform, sets and levels, elements of the curriculum and pastoral system and expectations of teachers are putting forward an idea of how they want students to act. That is what it is. Okay. So a neo-Marxist is somebody who is more advanced than our traditional Marxists. They move away from money being the sole reason as to why we have inequality. And they took a look at things like gender and ethnicity. And they argue that schools are ideological structures which may show ideological struggles. Now that's true. In every school, we have moral, political dilemmas and arguments and conversations being had at any one time. They coexist together and are sometimes in competition between if we think what is right for that student, but school is a business. So how do we keep ourselves from not going bankrupt? We are a business, we have to do what's best for the students, but also what's best for the school. And that's tricky. This is me in a nutshell, and lots of other teachers. We've got different views about the education system. Some people love it. Some people argue it's not fit for purpose. Some place higher values on things like punctuality rather than conformity. Every teacher has expectations of their classes, and that will vary based on a whole host of things. Which is very interesting if we think about achievement. So that's one aspect. We know the hidden curriculum, we can link it to ideas, and we've got things that we can argue that go against this idea as well. The second part here are pupil subcultures. Again, we've looked at this already. Subcultures are groups within wider society that they share attitudes and values, but they're different to those in society. And we have lots of subcultures within school. We've got anti-school, pro-school, all of which we'll look at in different bits of research. So we've got 8 ways, Peter Woods argues, that we adapting to school. Now this is really, really interesting because I can think of a student for every single one of these. So I think what you should do is pause this and reflect on it, add some notes, and maybe, don't talk about it. Maybe in your head think about, who could you link to for each of these. Could be interesting to do. And then let's delve into some research. So male subcultures. 2 key bits of research here. Hollingworth and Williams in 2009 and Mack and Gale in 1994. So Hollingworth suggested that our working class peer groups with anti-school attitudes exist, but they've kind of rebranded themselves as the years have gone on. So our working class anti-school cultures are lads and chavs. You could argue maybe they've evolved like a Pokemon to road men, road women. I'm sure there's other names out there, I don't know. And we've got different middle class subcultures, such as, this was so 2009, skaters, poshies, and goths, which I'm sure there are new terminology, e-girls and emos. I'm sure you can think of loads more than I can. Forever evolving. Whereas Mac and Gale, 28 years ago, this research, 4 or 5 different types of boys that we see in school. We've got the macho lads, a norm for working class boys, academic achievers, skilled working class, they value education, the new enterprises, they're pro-school, rejected our traditional curriculum, they are study things like computing and business and computer science and media or IT. The real Englishman, middle class, rejecting what teachers had to offer, seeing themselves as superior. Achieved success effortlessly. And they're the gay students. Commented on the homophobic nature of schools, took for granted the naturalness of heterosexual relationships and two-parent nuclear family. Interesting. If I'm honest, I think this is still true to life. I think this is still what we see 28 years later. You might think differently. You might have evidence to go against me, but I think this sums up boys quite well from what they found. Female subcultures, 3 bits of research here. Mac and Gale again. Girls often on lower level courses, doing stereotypical work. They disliked the macho lads, but chose them as boyfriends. Lower class or working class girls saw work as a potential marriage market, and mobile girls saw careers more in terms of independence. So this is saying that girls go to work to find a husband. Oh God. I mean, they might. That was 28 years ago. So how relevant is this? Potentially not so much. Even older, Griffin, white working class women, the first 2 years in employment, oh, that should say groups, created small friendship groups. When they were deviant, defined as sexual deviance rather than troublemaking. And there were 3 routes that girls could follow at the same time: getting a job, getting a partner, and being in a sexual relationship. So this, as a summary, is basically saying that girls value their relationships. They are becoming more sexually deviant. Remember, this was the 80s. And the routes that girls go, or the way they live their lives, is by getting a job, getting married, and having sex. Charming. And then Mirza, early 90s. 62 black women aged 15 to 19 in 2 secondary schools. They mostly had positive attitudes towards success, but they thought their teachers were racist. Sadly unsurprising in the early 90s. Very small sample, I'd argue, for that. Only 2 secondary schools, but good to look at more, so it's hard to generalise, but interesting at the same time. So when we look at different subcultures, if we look at ethnicity, again, this is where this section kind of ties in everything we've looked at in education. For both males and females, depending on the ethnic minority, it was a rejection of differential treatment on the basis of their ethnicity and gender. So some black boys may be rejecting school because they're favouring, or they want street cred. They want to join potential gangs. They want to make friendships. And that's how they achieve their status. Black girls are striving to achieve in alternative ways. So, you know, I said before, my Nigerian friend and her family, they push for their kids to get the best careers. They're doctors, they're architects, they're lawyers, what's the word I'm looking for? Economists. So all groups have substantial members of conformists who attract little attention. So it's very hard to generalize this idea. Archer has a really interesting bit of research. Muslim boys in 4 schools in northwest England sometimes drew upon African American gangster culture, which valued talking tough and having a macho identity. This is interesting. The way students talk, the way they hold themselves. It's all about status. It's all about power. And these boys were also affected by ideas on masculinity, by breadwinners in the household, telling them that, you know, boys are supposed to go out there, earn the money, get a good career. So they wanted to achieve, but they also wanted this macho, laddie identity. And that's not that long ago. Okay, third part then is talking about labelling theory and how it leads to the self-fulfilling prophecy. 2 key ideas that we look at in education, we look at in crime. So what is labelling? We're attaching a meaning to somebody based on a behaviour. What happens then is that is taken on board, and for some, they start to act up to the label. And again, we've come across this already. Marxist view and also class factors. So that's that for that. That's that for that. Labelling theory, we can already tie it to some research. We're going to come back to it in a few slides' time. Teacher-pupil relationships, another process that happens within school. If we refresh, we're going back to expectations, we're going back to labelling. Becker's view with the high school teachers, middle class were their ideal pupil. Rosenthal and Jacobson, we had the spurter pupils, those who were told that teachers were told they're amazing, they're going to achieve so well. They put more emphasis in them more, and they did indeed achieve. Gilbourne and Udell, again, we've come across teachers discriminating against the working class. They might not show their academia in the same way that middle class might do for a whole host of reasons, which may impact the relationship teachers have. And when we talk about differential treatment between ethnic minority groups, research found that they are left out of discussions. Black boys are seen as loud, confident, more excluded. And teachers misinterpret behaviour and see them as anti-authority, according to research. Okay. Teaching and learning. So how is school organised? What we teach and how we teach it. So here, 4 things that we use in pretty much every secondary school. We mix our students together based on ability. We group our students by ability for most of their lessons. We set them for particular subjects, most common for secondary schools. Then when they're in groups or they're in their classes, we make ability groups within that. So we might put our A grade students together, our C's, our B's. They have their strengths and they have their limitations. Now, when we do this at primary level, when there's grouping in primary level, reading, adjustments, streams, and pupils below average, when we look at reading, most pupils wanted to be in that top group. They didn't want to feel left out. They wanted to be the best readers. Now, I don't remember that at primary school. I think I was actually in one of the nurture sets for literacy. That was a very, very long time ago. But apparently here, research is showing that this is where they want to be. Social adjustments. In classes that aren't streamed, we see a better attitudes towards peers of different ability. Now, I wonder if that's because they're not singled out, they're all together, they have the opportunity to build friendships and relationships with people they might have never spoke to. Whereas when we did stream, the more negative the attitudes of those in lower streams. And I think it's hard. When you get older, you're not really bothered. But when you're younger, it's like, well, why am I in this stream? Why am I in this set? And there's stigma and there's stereotypes that come along with that. Pupils below average taught by teachers who believed in streaming could become friendless or neglected by others. So this is why, actually, when we look at the research, it probably is best to mix. It's difficult because you might have behaviour issues, you might have those that are really high achievers, but it takes away all of the problems that it creates. When we look at it in secondary, it's not necessarily much difference. When we ability group, involving like putting them in sets, at secondary, they like that because they can be pushed if they're in top set, supported if they're in bottom. Maths is an interesting one here, produces more negative than positive. Then when you're streaming, you're keeping the same groups together in every lesson, you will see the stream that has pro school and anti-school. And it's interesting when you put a number next to that. So 8Q1 or 8P4, and if you're in that the whole way through your school career for history, geography, you know, dance, drama, whatever, I wonder if that number, you know that you're in 8P4, whether that plays a role in your anti-school or pro school. Okay, we're almost there. Next is identity. So your identity is how you see yourself and how you are seen by others. Lots of things will play a role in that: gender, class, sexuality, ethnicity. Now, we've got some interesting research here. Comprehensive school in London, in a boys' school, 11 to 16. 61 Asian students, 63 from African origin, 140 African American, 127 white boys, and 23 other ethnicities. So we've got a wide range of, a wide sample size, a very diverse sample size. It was semi-structured interviews and observations. And they found that the black students were disciplined excessively by teachers who were socialised into racist attitudes, felt threatened by their masculinity, sexuality, and physical skills. So that says to me that teachers were scared of how seemingly aggressive these boys, they perceive them to be. So identity is really interesting. This is Tony Sewell's research. And we can unpick it. We can say great sample, only in the West, only in London. Semi-structured interviews, well, we're going to have issues with, they might lie, they might big up. But it's a bit like educating Yorkshire. If you know you're being interviewed, you might change your behaviour. Same in observation. Interesting nonetheless. Young in 2012 were in Glasgow, in Scotland, emphasising the importance of social structures like class for explaining why groups exist. We're moving away from our unskilled work, which is where our working class subcultures would be, because they reject those school values. Agency, these theories are based on the active choices of individuals as they form social groups. So as they start to construct their own identity, we've got two things playing a role. The social structures help us create who we are. Traditionally, if you are working class, then you're more likely to be in unskilled work or in factory work. Agency is your own choice that you play in terms of who you decide to be friends with, who your group is. That's how you then develop your sense of identity. In this, Young surveyed 22 Scottish schools to say which is more important, social structures or your own choice. They're asked about things like what they've read. Did they hang around on the streets and drink cider? What was their family life like? Tell you about your parents. Do you really like school? Do you like hip hop? Very specific. And Young found those with NED characteristics were more likely to be boys and come from deprived areas. They call them NEDs. It's a bit like the lads, the NEDs. Not really in education. Why was his findings not always the case? Well, some of the girls from affluent background chose this NED identity to earn respect. Now, we are actually seeing more and more of this in lower school. Girls wanting to be part of a group, and their group is hanging around in the toilets. Their group is not going to lessons because they want to be part of this weird toilet group. It's odd. And so Young concluded that while structural factors are important, some pupils choose to not engage with school, even if they are clever, even if they have fantastic parents and they have, really great upbringings. Your peer groups are so important in and out of education. So I think this is a really good bit of research. 22 Scottish schools, we've got a good sample. However, it is only in Scotland, so it does make it hard to generalise. Some of the things they're asked are very specific, like hip hop. Could be better to be more broad. Connolly, late 90s, looking at primary school children and the diverse influences on the way that gender and ethnic identities are formed. Very similar. We're talking about inside and outside of school factors. We've only got 3 classes of 5 to 6-year-olds in one inner city primary school. So it's not great in terms of generalizability. Whole host of methods: interviews, observations, group interviews. Black boys, teachers were more willing to criticise than any other ethnic minority groups. Felt the males were in danger of criminality and saw them as a threat. Tried to encourage them in more social activities. Now that's interesting. I wonder why. I wonder why they thought the boys were in danger of being criminals, especially when you are in a multi-ethnic inner city school. Black girls, disruptive, good at sports. South Asian boys, law-abiding, conformist, but they were picked on. They struggled with confidence. South Asian girls, obedient, hard-working, kind of just left alone by teachers, by students, just to get on with it. Assumed that they would. So again, an interesting piece of research looking at differences in identity. So it is useful. It helps us link inside and outside of school factors. It tells us about pupil interaction with their home, with their teachers, their peers. And so my questions are, what else is at play? How far do these identities shape our attitudes? Does being a boy or being a black boy or being a South Asian girl, does that affect the way you look or you act in school, in your perception of school, shaping your identity?